Hey, Carl, thank you for accepting my invitation to talk. And so, are you comfortable to start our interview? Yeah.
Yes, of course. Yes,
Okay.
thanks for having me.
Thank you very much. And would you please, first of all, just briefly introduce yourself, your background, what have you done, and so when, and then we dive into the questions.
Sure. Well, at my age, it's not so brief anymore. um, I started out in music.
Actually,
Yeah, yeah,
brief for yourself, not for us. Yeah.
sure, of course. I started out by studying music, and along the way, I got very interested in audio engineering. So I started doing recording projects, and then after I got my music degree, I went back to school and learned recording engineering. And part of that process, I learned a little bit about film sound. I took a film sound course, and I was an intern in the film sound office at the university. And then I went into the Air Force, the US Air Force in the United States, but as a sound engineer. They have military bands. They probably have those everywhere in the world, of course. And so I went on tour with the US Air Force Band, doing the sound for every performance. And when I got out of the Air Force, I went to work at Sennheiser as a product manager for the Neumann microphone line, and that's why I have a Neumann here that I'm talking to you now. And I was at Sennheiser for 8 years, and then I went to work for Lectrosonics, kind of continuing that, doing kind of product management, on the marketing side, talking to people that use the products and getting ideas about future products and helping people solve problems, as well as, making tutorial videos and things like that. So, with those jobs, I've done a lot of, gone to a lot of conventions and sat on panel discussions and done presentations and education as well. So a lot of different things in the last 30 years.
Oh, that's great. Uh, actually I saw a essay from you. It was 5 lessons of doing some experiences, and one of I think two of
Yes.
those lessons was about some memories from the Air Force, touring Air Force.
Right.
And,
Yes, that's
in
correct.
forward,
Yeah.
we are talking about that lessons. The talk should be would be in 3 parts. First is getting familiar with you, some talking with some background, some advices, and the second part would be
Sure.
the general talk about the sound, and the third
Uh-huh.
part is a little bit technical, and and we are done.
Okay, that's great.
Uh, okay. The second is how to gain experience, and why is important, because you in your essay you talk about the experience,
Yeah.
and you told that you learned something in the school and in the university, and uh, there was a problem on the stage or on set, something like that, and uh, in that essay you wrote that I didn't have any experience, and you called
Mhm.
somebody and something like that. It just talk about more about
Yeah.
experience, why is important, and how to gain experience.
Yeah. I mean, experience is indispensable. I believe that to be a good audio engineer, it is my opinion that you need an education. You need to understand the fundamentals, a little bit about the mathematics behind, and the theory, the physics. Those things are important, and they often are best learned in the classroom with good teachers that understand these kinds of concepts very well. I was lucky to have very good teachers, but um, I believe also that we don't really know how to apply those things until we get out there in the world and start um, encountering the problems and the challenges. And so experience comes from dealing with those problems and challenges and overcoming them and figuring out how to use our education and our knowledge to get the job done. And in terms of how to get experience, I think it starts the same way for all of us. We become interested in something, and we start to look for opportunities. How do we get to do things like sound? And then we have to learn who the people are that are doing this kind of work, and we have to ask them for help, ask them for guidance, and then go to work. And like I consider this kind of work to be part of the guild system. This is a very old system used for hundreds, maybe thousands of years, for people to gain experience and become masters at any craft. So this means that when you first start, you have to be willing to do the very basic things like sweep the floor, clean up the equipment. Equipment gets dirty, dusty, sticky, tape, you have to remove tape residue.
Utility.
You have to learn how to solder and make cables and work with tools. The very basic things that, again, kind of no matter what it is, what craft you want to learn, you have to learn these kinds of things. If it's in a wood shop, you have to learn how to sharpen the tools and clean up the sawdust, right? So this is the same kind of thing. So you have to be willing to do those things. That's number one. Then along the way, you begin to learn from these master craftsmen. You begin to learn the nuances of what it is that they do. At first, it seems simple. We plug a microphone into a mixer and we put the microphone in front of the talent. Right. But, to be very good at these things, you have to do it many hundreds of times and start to learn these nuances in any craft, certainly in the craft of sound. Also, along the way, you have to learn how to listen. In other words, most people hear a lot of sounds and don't know what the source is of all those sounds. So we have to listen carefully and understand how to take apart the sounds we hear and begin to understand what makes those sounds possible. And along the way, we have to learn how to identify problems in the sound, how to identify what kind of distortion it is, what kind, because it could be, for instance, hum could be from a generator in another room, or hum could be from an electronic hum, a ground loop or a bad power supply, And so we have to learn how to listen. And the only way to do that is by spending time on the job doing these basic kinds of tasks. So that's the way to get started and to get experience, I think.
There is two perspective of getting experience. As I talked with some other persons. One perspective is to start to work as assistant. For example, there was a guy I was talking to. He was a British sound mixer, and he told me I started by working as utility, and then I got upgraded to boom operating, and then I started to just sit behind the mixer. That was one perspective of getting experience. And the second perspective was the guy told me I studied academic sound on university, and then I started to do independently work on small project like short films, like documentaries, like working for friends, something like that. But working as a sound mixer independently and getting this experience by working on others' small jobs, and then spread out my job to bigger projects. What kind of perspective do you agree with?
I think either one is fine because they're both similar. The smaller independent projects type approach gives you the perspective probably of more about everything that goes into making a film. It's a small team, it's a small film. a small budget, maybe no budget. And so you get a better sense of everything it takes to make a film. When you are an assistant in a large production, you're probably a little bit isolated from some of the aspects of making the film, and that's okay. You're probably in that scenario where you're an assistant to an established mixer. You're learning probably more about what it takes to make a big budget film. And, so both of those things are important. I would say if you can do both, you should do both. In other words, be an assistant and then at the same time accept small project work, independent work, where maybe you'll get a chance to mix sooner, and understand what kind of mistakes you can make when you do that and learn from that. So both approaches are valid, and I would say try to do both if you can. You'll get a different perspective from each one.
So you mean that the mixture of doing these kind of path to getting experience is much more better than once?
Absolutely. Yeah, the more kinds of things you can do, the better. And maybe not even all of it to be film work, but to just do some location recording. Let's say someone wants to play a piano in a church somewhere, and they need it to get a recording, a good video, and with good audio. Well, take that on, because there's acoustic challenges, noise challenges, figuring out where to position the microphones. All these things are educational, and the more you learn, the better off you can be when the challenges come in a big production.
Can you tell me more about your some of your projects you've done before, just briefly?
Sure. Most of the projects I've done have to do with either live sound, as I said before, and I continue to do some of that work, and also location recording, like I described, where there's going to be a concert or a recital or a recording done in a church somewhere. And for instance, I was just contacted by a violinist who wanted to add some tracks to a friend's song. And so she asked me, how can we do this? So what I'll probably do is have a laptop and a microphone preamp, USB pre, and get the tracks, put it in a multi-track recorder, and go to her house and record it there, rather than a studio. These days with technology, you can do these kinds of things where 20 years ago it would have been nearly impossible. So those are the kind of projects I'm doing now. I don't do any films myself personally.
What was your most difficult project?
Oh gosh, well, when I was on tour with the Air Force Band, we did a national tour in the United States where we did 23 shows in 23 days in different cities in the US. And it was a 44-piece band. So we orchestra and 5 singers. So putting that large of a group into a different place every day for a month was a big challenge, physically, mentally, and with the technology. In other words, to solve the acoustic challenges, to make sure all of the equipment worked every single night, as well as unloading the truck, setting everything up, loading the truck every single day. That was the toughest job I've done for sure.
I think that was the toughest project from the board.
Well, there's people that do this kind of work all day, every day. I really admire the people that go out on big tours and have to work that hard every day for years on end sometimes. It's amazing to me.
It's a hard job.
Yeah, it's a tough job. And filmmaking is a tough job. The very long days. Even though I haven't worked on a film as a sound engineer, I've done some work as a musician. Sometimes they call you, they want a musician or a group to be in a scene in a movie, and the hours that are involved are just amazing. You have to show up and make sure that you check in with wardrobe, and then you have to wait for hours, and then you have to go to the set and they do some tests and some lighting, and then by then it's the middle of the night. Then they begin to do take after take after take with different camera setups and different angles. And, it's incredible the amount of time and the amount of effort that goes into filmmaking. I've certainly observed a lot of it, being in the business, and I admire it a lot. I think it's incredibly tough. I don't think anyone who doesn't do it has any idea how much work it is.
Yeah, my recent experience was working several months on some documentaries, and it was a very tough job because
Yeah.
we were supposed to travel the whole country, and we were shooting on top of mountain, or on the
Hmm.
desert, and once a time we were shooting underground, and I was supposed to go on really underground and we had some footage there. It was very tight place, just
Yeah.
one person could walk. It was very tight. And very scary actually.
I would imagine. Yeah, I've never done any work underground. I don't know what that's like, but I can imagine that it is
it's
a
at
little bit scary.
it was really scary. Yeah, at the
Mm.
first, the director told me, okay, we are going to go this hole down and working down, and it was
Mhm.
it was at the end of a cave,
Mhm. Yeah.
a very dark cave, and going to how hole, very deep hole. It was really scary.
Yeah. I just, again, I think that the kinds of things we do collectively in our industry is amazing to get the end result that you see. People don't know all the work and effort and pain and blood, sweat, and tears, we say, yeah, behind every film, even a minor film, even, a short film. So much work and effort and care goes into it. It's incredible.
How someone can enter this industry as a sound guy, any kind, for example, field sound mixing, or musician, or engineering, any kind.
Yeah, well, I think the first part is to get to know who the people are in your local area that are doing this work, and introduce yourself and explain that you're interested in the work. And is there some way that you can help, uh, you know, with whatever they need? And so maybe they'll start you and say, well, we need a runner, someone that can just run errands and take equipment around and move things, you know, and then from there you can observe what's involved and who is making the decisions, and you know maybe eventually get on the payroll for a project, just as an assistant. In the meantime, you have to be reading the books and watching the YouTube videos, and taking the online training courses and so on. In other words, understand what part of this business you want to be in, and if it's sound, learn all about sound.
Mhm.
So when the time comes, it's like, well, when they ask you, well, what part of this do you want to be involved with? Well, I want to do sound. Okay, well, then, like you said, the next step might be, well, okay, we need an assistant to the utility. Okay. And then you learn what the utility does. And eventually maybe you get to be a utility on the sound, which is the let's say, third person in the order, right? You have the sound mixer, the boom operator, and the utility. And a lot of films are made with a 3-person sound team like that. Um, from there, you can observe closely, very closely, what's happening, how to deal with the talent. You have to learn a lot of things that are unwritten rules. The etiquette of being on a set. You're not allowed to take any pictures. You have to treat the talent with respect, but be friendly. There's a lot of things like that you have to learn, and you'll learn them by being there. But I would just say, if they're, let's say in the United States, a lot of filmmaking is done by local unions, then you have to apply to join the union. And then there's a whole process, sort of like learning to be a pilot. You have to have a certain number of hours, before you can be considered to be a member of the union. And those hours are spent doing exactly what we've described, helping, being an assistant, running errands, whatever it takes, and eventually learning the craft. And then you'll be part of a small circle of people that's doing this work. So it takes probably some number of years to get from just wanting to do it and being interested to, working in the field.
Mhm. Yes, etiquette is very important because I saw that on you in that essay you wrote. You were one of your lesson you wrote about was about uh, having good relation with other departments and how to behave and how to talk, and
Absolutely, yes.
that was very, very amazing for me too. That's very important to keep in touch with other departments. In forward, just a little bit, we talk more about it.
Hmm.
And what kind of mistakes uh, a sound guy can make?
Well, there's no end to the number of mistakes that a sound guy can make. Uh, um, One thing for sure is, a mistake is to not know your equipment really well. If you own your own equipment, it's a little easier because you can spend time with it. When you're not working, you can take everything apart, put it all back together again, do the sort of prep work to make sure that every single wire, every single, menu inside these devices. These devices have a lot of complexity anymore. They're extremely powerful and flexible devices that we have available to us now. But of course, it's always been true. In the days of analog tape 30 years ago, 20 years ago, you had to know your Nagra tape machines very, very well and understand how to take care of them and keep them clean and working properly. Today, in the digital world, it's more about knowing how to get exactly what you want. So that means knowing how to route the signal through the machinery. So that's a mistake, is to not know your equipment absolutely inside and out. It's also a mistake to not maintain your equipment really well. And that means keeping this stuff really clean, but also doing the regular maintenance, updating the firmware, doing the internal testing, things like that, the diagnostics. I think it's a mistake to ignore your gut feelings about a situation. For instance, if you think there's a noise that's going to cause a problem, but you don't tell anybody, that's a mistake. If you, yeah, in other words, it's important to admit it also. It's a mistake not to admit your mistakes. In other words, we all make mistakes. So let's say you're a utility and you're putting the transmitters on the talent, right? And you realize that you forgot to change the battery. Well, you better tell somebody. Don't just let it fail. You need to fess up. And I think honesty is really important, and transparency. That's part of working with everyone else on the team, is communicating. So that's another mistake, not communicating well, or thinking that the words you said are good enough. And when really communication is an art, and it has to be learned, and it has to be practiced. You have to do it often. So those are all very general kinds of things. But in sound, one of the mistakes one specific mistake is to not set your gain structure properly through your entire system. And then if you make that mistake, you won't know why there's sound problems, there's distortion, or there's high noise, and you won't know why. And it's because you haven't done your gain structure right. That's such a fundamental thing in any type of sound, no matter what it is you're doing, whether it's a big concert sound, live sound performance, or just a one microphone boom straight into a recorder. That gain structure really matters. So that's a mistake that's very often made. So there's a start on the list of mistakes. Like I say, that covers a lot of ground.
Uh, let's jump to the second part, and we talk more about the general part of the sound.
Mm-hmm.
For first question of this part, just let's get familiar to the sound and what is sounds in general,
Yeah.
from perspective of a professional.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Sound is anything that's in the acoustic environment. That means, when you're in a space, sound is everything that you can possibly hear or measure or record. It's everything that's there. And like many things, I consider this like photography. Everyone thinks they can be a photographer, but when you look with your eyes into the world, or when you listen with your ears into the world, the uneducated eye or the uneducated ear doesn't realize that you're applying filters all the time. Your mind is filtering out the things that you don't want to look at or the things that you don't want to hear. Okay. For instance, you might be in a room and you don't notice that there's a refrigerator running, right? Making a buzz or making a hum or a fan running, something like that, until it shuts off. And then you realize, wow, it's quiet all of a sudden. But before that, your brain was filtering this out. So sound is everything that's in that environment. And the professional is going to look at that situation or listen into that situation very analytically, very carefully, listening to every part of the spectrum actively, not just passively listening to somebody talk, but actively examining with their ears every part of that environment and trying to figure out if there's going to be problems. For instance, a refrigerator running in the room next door when I can hear the hum in my headphones. There can be air handling, right? The whoosh of air. There can be a hum. So in general, I was talking about the fact that the professional is going to listen to all these kinds of problems and then begin to think about solutions. How do we fix things like a hum or a fan running? And I mentioned the thing about footsteps in a scene are a problem. So we treat the floor or the ground. We treat the shoes of the actors, things like that. If there's weather like rainfall can be a problem in a scene. If we're in a room where we can hear it hitting the roof, so all those kind of things. This is what professionals are always thinking. They're trying to figure out, is there sound coming into my microphone that I do not want? And then trying to remove those things. That's always going on in the mind of a professional sound engineer, no matter what kind of work they're doing.
In forward, I wanted to ask you a question, but just changing some questions and bring it up. Sure. Because you talk about listen analytically, listen carefully. How to improve our ear? How to improve ear to just hear this kind of way you told, analytically and carefully? How?
Sure. With practice. And so the kinds of exercises that I've done, I had a teacher in college who at the beginning of every class, we would listen to a recording. Okay. We would listen to, usually some kind of song. And he wanted us to write down what instruments did we hear, voice, guitar, bass, drums, keyboard, piano, whatever. And then make a little chart about the relative volumes of each of the things we heard. And then what kinds of effects were on those tracks. And try to decide, was it all recorded in one room together? Was it recorded separately? That kind of thing. So that was just an exercise to actively listen to every single thing that was coming to us in the recording. But I think we can do those things ourselves easily enough. We can set up little exercises. For film sound, the exercise is going to be more along the lines of just sit in a room and listen to everything that you hear. Do you hear the noise of traffic driving by? Do you hear the noise of an airplane overhead? Do you hear the noise of birds? Do you hear any machines in your home? You know what I mean? Just and then make a list. Say, here's all the things I hear. These are louder. These are softer. I almost don't hear this, but it sounds like my neighbor is working on something in his garage, or maybe my neighbors are talking, they're out on their back porch, you know, because that's more like what you're going to encounter when you're trying to make a film is these background noises. So being able to hear them and identify them, the more you do this, you're training your brain. It's like your ears, that's like a microphone. It doesn't know what it's picking up, but your brain becomes better and better at understanding all the different things it's hearing. So the more you can do this, the better you get at it.
What is the most problems of sound department on set for on live recording or on filming?
And filming in particular, yeah, I would say that first of all, it is coordinating with other departments is the biggest problem. In other words, you might have a location manager that's trying to find a place that looks a certain way. Okay, that's always there. Almost most of filmmaking, they're thinking about how it looks. Okay, where it is being shot, how it is being lit, the colors, these kinds of things. That's what they're thinking about. How wide of an angle of a lens do I use? All the time. Really good directors are also thinking about this has to sound good. Okay. So they will put good people in charge of doing the sound and trust what they say. So, but specifically, the kinds of problems in filmmaking are usually other noises that are nearby that you unfortunately don't have control over. For instance, someone is using a lawnmower. Someone is using a leaf blower. So there's construction just one block away from you, that kind of thing. That's the biggest challenges in filmmaking. When you get inside and those problems are less, it's more about the acoustics of the space that can be the problem. A lot of reflections or echoes, very live space where the sound just keeps bouncing around. Again, they might choose a location because it looks fantastic, but you get there and you realize, wow, everything is stone and glass all over the place. I mean, that's a nightmare, for a sound engineer, sound mixer trying to get good dialogue. And so, I mean, it brings up the bigger issue. One thing we have to always keep in mind as this representing sound in filmmaking is that at least half of the picture is sound. This is the main concept we have to always remember. And the reason for that is sound, dialogue is the story, okay? And when that is forgotten, we really have problems. When they think it's all about the way it looks. And I mean, there's films where maybe that's true. Some of these comic book adventure films with lots of computer animation, CGI, it's all about the action. It's not, who cares what they have to say, but most films, the dialogue is the picture. The story is the picture. And then everything else supports that. So you can really think of it as the foundation of the film is the dialogue, and everything else is extra. I mean, most directors would not agree with you, and that's fair. It has to look amazing too anymore, of course. The film has to look great.
The problem which I frequently face too, and the sentence which most of directors says, we do it in post for sound.
Mm-hmm.
For example, I told to the director, okay, we have some unwanted noises, we have construction over there, or some electricity noises comes from the very, very big electricity device outside of the building. And he said that, okay, no problem, we fix it in post.
Right.
Do you agree with this sentence? And if not, how to change this perspective that sounds is not important on set and it can be fixed on post-production?
Yeah, it's a very common problem. And I don't agree with that. I think that capturing the dialogue in the performance should always be the goal. And really the best sound mixers in the world, all believe that and agree with that. And they are hired because of that. When you talk about some of the greatest directors, let's say in the United States, Quentin Tarantino, his movies are famous for storytelling and, being extreme drama, right? He always has a scene that lasts 20 minutes long where it just, the tension builds up for 20 minutes straight. It's all about the dialogue, right? So he hires Mark Ulano because he knows, he trusts him to make sure that the performances are captured, and that's the dialogue they use almost, entirely, right? And then you get to directors that are smaller budgets and they don't believe in that and they think it can be fixed in post. Well, for one thing, that always adds cost in post. If you have good dialogue captured, you can always save time and money in post-production. So maybe that's one angle to approach it is, look, we should get it right in the first place, and that'll save you time and money later. Now, the really good experienced directors, they understand that. It's the inexperienced directors or the ones that just don't care. And some of them will never be, you can't convince them to care about that. That's you're always going to have directors like that. So I think as we go along in our careers and we build trust with the people that hire us, we get more and more opportunities to have an influence on that. But it's not easy. And it takes a lot of patience on our part to go through that long process of building trust and, working with people that understand that. Ultimately, the goal for us is to work with directors who understand that and value sound and know how important it is. But that's certainly not in every situation.
One of my own experience was we were shooting on the scene was the main character comes to a club and there is this dancing, girls and boys were dancing, and there is a music there, and there's some dialogue with the main character and somebody in that club. And I told to that it was very simple. I told to the director, everybody should fake dancing and there shouldn't be any music, actual music at all.
Right.
And he said that these are not professional actors. I just brought from my friends and friends of friends, and they can't dance without music.
Right.
And I told him, okay, it's not working because if you play music, so it can be nothing to record here.
Yeah.
And it said that, okay, we do it in the studio.
Right. It's very common. And in the better or bigger productions, they understand that. And and that part of that, the budget challenge. How do you afford to have all that extra equipment and the people to run it? And it's a very common problem. It sounds quite right when it's done in post, in my opinion. You can tell.
In your essay, you told about biases and just liking some gears and over liking actually some gears or some mic places, and you told about avoiding this kind of biases. What is it about and how to avoid? Because sometimes it's kind of trap. I'm also trapped in this kind of biases myself, and I like, for example, some kind specific microphones, and I use frequently, although I knew that it doesn't work here. How to avoid?
I don't. That's a difficult challenge. We all have bias, and I think the main thing is to be honest with ourselves and others. When it's not working, admit it to yourself and just be ready to do that. It's not sounding right. We need to change something. We need to change the microphone. We need to do something different. So that's part of it is being honest with yourself first. And I think it's absolutely okay to say, I use this microphone because I like it. I like the way it sounds. That's totally fair. These are matters of opinion, but if it so happens that you've worked on 3 projects, and someone along the way, maybe someone in post or the sound supervisor or whatever, says, the dialogue just is not clear enough. I don't know what you're doing, but it's not working for me. At some point, you have to admit, I wonder if it's because of this microphone that I like that isn't, maybe no one else likes it. No one, you know what I mean? So part of it is being honest with yourself and being willing to learn new things. In our business and any craft where we want to be really good at something, the world changes around us and we need to adapt. So, maybe there's newer technology, a newer microphone or whatever that might work better. Or in some cases, maybe you have the newest one and maybe there's an old one that would work better. So we have to always be willing to, again, use our ears critically. Don't just, can filter things we don't want, but sometimes it can, it wants to protect the ego, right? We want to protect our own ego. So we're thinking, well, this is the microphone I like, and so therefore it's always going to be right. And the truth is it's not. So we need to set the ego aside for a minute and say, okay, let me listen critically again today, as if I'm listening for the first time. Well, you know what? Maybe one of the reasons I like this microphone is because it has a nice warm sound, but it turns out it's rolled off on the top. That's why I like it. And that's why post, they don't like it. It's not crisp, right? So, back to practicing and educating ourselves and being open-minded. That's a constant challenge. The brain wants to find shortcuts. And this is one of those shortcuts. I know I like this microphone. I don't need to listen to anything else. Well, actually, we do. We need to be listening to new things all the time and deciding for ourselves, again, if we're doing the right thing, if we're making the right choice. These biases are very human. There's really no way around the biases themselves. But by changing how we think about these things and what the relationship is to this bias, we can get better at it.
One of my own experience just recently, there was a disagreement between me and the producer, because the producer was liking oversaturated sound.
Mm-hmm.
And he told me, okay, I'm not satisfied with some of dialogue, which I wasn't recorded. Some of my partner did, but he told me, could you please listen to that dialogues? I don't like it. And I just listened to the dialogue. There wasn't any problem with dialogues, but I understood that he likes oversaturated dialogue, and that sound wasn't. And
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
I told him it's clear, and you can gain what you want in post-production, but recording is completely clean. But this is post-production process, and if you send to the sound designer, he can do everything you want, and and the problem was done. What it was a really challenge between that my partner sound recorder with the producer.
Right. You bring up a good point, though, is that, you understand the process and you can explain it to him. Is maybe that when he sees a finished film, and he hears kind of dialogue that he wants to hear, and it's that oversaturated type. Well, sure. But that's not something you want to do on capture. That's something to do in post. And, we can also find other ways around that. Maybe you record 2 tracks for every dialogue, and one of those tracks is boosted so that, here, listen to this version. He can say, yes, that's what I want. Great. Well, you got both versions, a standard, clean, very clean version, and a hot version that he says, oh, I love that. You're doing great. You know what I mean? So that psychology is understanding how to give them what they want, but at the same time do exactly what you have to do to get the best results. So sometimes those things don't match, but sometimes you can deliver both if you're clever or if you have enough tracks, which you don't always,
there is so many people educated sound, and they have experience on sound, and they know equipments, they know gears, they know how to work with them. how to be special, special sound mixer or sound recorder or supervisor than ordinary one, because everybody do what to do, how to be special over these persons,
Hmm.
to be picked
Um,
by professionals. This, for example, this is there is a professional director. He wants to choose between too many sound mixers. How to be
mhm, mhm.
special than the other uh, ordinary one?
Yeah, that's a complicated question. Um, I've always believed that the answer to that is to be indispensable. Okay, in other words, to deliver something that no one else can deliver. And what that is different for each of these customers, each of these directors. Some of that is the psychology, like what we talked about. Imagine the difference between two people that are recording dialogue for that director that you talked about, the one who likes a saturated sound, and one of the people, same issue, right? You both record it very, very clean, and and he says, well, but I don't like that. um, how do you respond to that? The person that figures out the response that satisfies him and says, you know what, this person gets me, this person understands what I need, um, that's the one that's going to get hired the next time, right? So that so much of that is psychology, understanding what the director or the
We're going
producer
back to the
wants. Yeah,
etiquette.
yeah.
Yes, we're going back to the etiquette
Etiquette.
then.
Yeah, yeah. To a large degree, in other words, don't give them any reason to fire you. And so much of that is etiquette, right? And so much of don't get fired is psychology. Understanding how they think, trigger words that they never want to hear, so be sure not to say those words. Maybe there's things that they always want to hear, and be sure to say those things and do those things. That comes from experience. Just understanding that each one of these directors or producers or sound supervisors is going to be different. They're looking and listening for different things, and sometimes it's as simple as going to them and saying, asking them the question, I'm on this project with you, and I want to know if there's anything that you really hate, what is it that you want to hear? And then when they tell you these things, sometimes they don't make any sense, but um, do your best to satisfy those things. Write it down, make a list. He never wants to hear this word, so be sure never to say that word. It sounds simple, but it's not simple in reality. Sometimes they don't want to tell you those things. They just want you to figure it out, and that becomes very challenging. So there's times when we might not get the next job, and we'll never know why. That happened to me once. I was working in a recording studio as an assistant engineer, and I thought everything was going fine, and then they just never called me again. And I never found out why. I heard different versions of it from different people, and I never really knew why I wasn't hired at that studio anymore. So I can only guess. And then there's other people that you have a conversation with, and they're very open and honest, and they will tell you exactly what they want and what they don't want. And that makes it easier, as long as they're being honest. So it's a combination of all those things. I would say the biggest skill overall that makes us hireable, okay, is being really good at problem solving, really good at troubleshooting and problem solving. That's the thing that probably gets you hired back more than anything else, is that instead of you being a problem, you make problems go away. And so that other people don't have to solve them. You solve them. And that requires the willingness to be humble and do whatever it takes. And whatever it takes, who knows what that means? It can mean a lot of different things. Maybe it means that you keep some money in your pocket, and when there's somebody down the street with a leaf blower, You walk down there and you say, I'll tell you what, I'll give you in the US, I'll give you $50 to take your lunch break now and take a nice long one, 2 hours. Go buy yourself a nice lunch and just disappear for a while, right? That's solving a problem. Now there's no sound of a leaf blower and you took care of it. You didn't say, well, there's a leaf blower, we have a problem. You made it go away, So making friends in all departments is a big one. Making sure that other departments see you as a solution, not a problem. That also gets you hired.
One of my own experience was I was working as an assistant on a project, and the sound mixer supervisor was the guy which had was working for a Oscar Farhadi film, which had a Academy Award and also Cannes Festival prizes. And he's very professional. He has so many international prizes. And there was a scene that the boom operator couldn't do his job well. And he's a supervisor. He's a great guy. He has Academy Award in sound. But he said that, okay, he told me, okay, just sit behind the mixer. I'm doing the boom operating. And he told the boom op, okay, go and take some rest and drink some tea, coffee, or something like that, and then come back. We do this thing. I know, and I understood that even to be this kind of experienced guy, such a great guy, can do boom operating and solving problem.
That's right. He solved the problem and he did what it took. That's right. He did what it took. He's willing to step in. He's willing to make it fit. Yeah.
I don't want to take too much time of you because I know you have a busy day. But just get more deep in technical, and then we'll finish our talk and you can have your day.
Right.
For more technical, how to choose best gear for any project? Which microphone fits this project? Which recorder which fits this project? Kind of wireless system I could take. How to choose these gears?
Sure. It's another complicated question, but I would say that the first thing to consider is what are the standards in the equipment, because there certainly are standards. I work for Lectrosonics. In most worldwide filmmaking, Lectrosonics is one of the standards. So choosing the standard, you can never go wrong. And because the really good quality equipment is always expensive, it's better to have an older standard than it is to have a new unknown piece of equipment. Because the standards have been around a long time. So that means that there's always used equipment out there. So if someone's trying to get into this business and build a bag, for instance, well, it's okay to choose older Lectrosonics equipment and older sound devices equipment. This stuff is good quality when it was made. It's still good quality now if it's been maintained. And the other thing about choosing standards is because of interoperability. That means when you have to borrow some additional equipment, which comes up a lot, or rent it, the standards are always available because the other people are using them too. So that means you can always get another sound devices mixer, but maybe the latest, greatest piece of equipment is hard to get because they're not in rentals yet and not that many people have them yet. So sure, on the absolutely A-list, A-budget, Hollywood big, production, it might be the latest, greatest gear there is. Okay, but for almost everybody else, it's better to have a type of equipment that's maybe one generation old and a standard, and everybody has the same equipment so that you can share, rent, borrow, because you'll run into situations where things break or you don't have enough things or something falls in the water. That always happens. So that's one way to look at it. The other way to look at it is, as I mentioned, there's more than one standard out there, right? So a lot of times we make choices based on what we are familiar with, meaning, if you have some experience using a sound devices mixer, you understand the menus, you understand their vocabulary, what they call the inputs and the outputs. And so you can operate, when you move from an old sound devices mixer to a newer one and then a newer one, there's always the continuity of that. And that's the same with Lectrosonics. The stuff we made 20 years ago, it's not the same as what we make now, but it's the same company with the same people. And so we're going to name things similar ways. And things like the gain structure, the when you plug a microphone into a transmitter and then you set it a certain way, you're going to get results that you're familiar with, even when you go between different devices from the same manufacturer. So that's another thing to think about, is what you're used to, what you have access to, and then it gets into the more business type things, like, is there a representative in your region that can help with problems? Is the company accessible online? Do they have training videos? Do they have a YouTube channel? Do they have social media where you can find them and ask them questions, things like that? So that's a lot of different things. Then, of course, it comes down to personal taste. Maybe you like the way a certain mixer sounds. That's absolutely fine. You should make a choice based on your preferences, as long as it doesn't take you out of the world of standards too much. It's okay to have a favorite mic preamplifier that you always want to use because, with your 416, it really sounds good and you like it, and post always is happy. By all means, maybe no one else is using that mic preamp, but you like it and it delivers good results, so you should use it. So personal preference definitely plays a role, but I think it's a little bit further down the list than maybe some people would think if they're new at this business.
Do you think that is there any cheap but affordable equipment, or no?
Yeah,
we have to
I think that
throw away the cheap equipment, huh?
Well, in this type of a business, the equipment is usually what they say is, you get what you pay for, right? The good stuff costs good money. There's no doubt about it. But again, it's better to buy used good equipment than it is to buy new cheap equipment. That's definitely true. But there's always layers of quality. For instance, my former company, Sennheiser, they make a good, affordable wireless mic product. When these are not very expensive systems, they work pretty well.
G4,
they're
G3.
very good for the money. Yeah, exactly. And there's a lot of them out there, many, many thousands of those units out there, new, used, any way you can find them. And they're affordable. They're not as good as the top line wireless equipment. But, for many types of productions, they're absolutely fine. I would not go any lower quality than that. When you're looking at recorders, Zoom makes some pretty interesting recorders these days. They're not as good as sound devices. They're not as good as Axcom, but they're very good for the money. They sound pretty good. They're pretty easy to use. So those ways of getting started are absolutely fine, but you also have to know when to draw the line and say, well, if I want to continue to advance in my career, this kind of equipment really isn't good enough. If you want to get on the bigger pictures, the bigger commercial shoots, whatever it is, that kind of gear is going to hold you back. So it's a constant challenge to be able to afford and invest in the better equipment to get the better kinds of work, and then get into the level where you have the standards, everyone you are working with and all the people that have these standards, and you can share the equipment. That's the level where you want to get.
Do you have any top 5 recommendation of some gears, for example, recorders, microphones, or wireless system?
Yeah, well, let's start with the microphone. I would say a boom mic is a very important piece of equipment. There's a number of really good boom mics out there. My favorites, again, an old standard, but still a good one, is the Sennheiser MKH 416. There's many, many thousands of them out there. I have one at the office. Very good microphone. We use it for some of our little instructional videos, maybe up in modern sound quality, you want to look at a DPA shotgun mic. Those are very, very nice. They sound very clean and they have very good off-axis performance. So, when there's the less than ideal acoustics in a room, the DPA is a really good choice. My favorite for sound quality is the Schoeps Cement. It's just an incredible sounding shotgun mic with maybe the best reach. It really seems to grab the sound. It's not a very technical word, but I like that microphone very much. We have one at the office. We use that as well. So those are maybe my top three boom mics. When you're talking about a hypercardioid mic, my favorite for a very long time has been the Schoeps MK41 capsule. It's a hypercardioid. Another really good one, of course, is the Sennheiser MKH50. That's another standard that just sounds wonderful, very, very clean. And the DPA makes a good mic as well. The 4011 is a cardioid. It's a little wider. So, it depends on the type of, if you're close in and you're interior, those mics are all wonderful. Hard to go wrong with any one of them. You see them out there a lot. You could also add in there the Neumann KM150. That's a very good mic for close interiors. So that's the mics. When you get to lav mics, I would say that the Sanken COS11 has been an old favorite for a very long time. It's still being used today. It sounds very good. It's got a certain crisp sound to it. I have
high
one for
gain and very high gain and very tiny.
Yeah. It's very thin. It's you can hide it in the clothing. I have one for my personal kit when I do interviews, like at a trade show. I have a COS11. I connect it to my transmitter, and it sounds really nice. The DPA 4000 series lav mics are probably everybody's favorite these days. They sound really natural. It's very close to like a studio sounding microphone. That's a really, really good one. But the older mics like the Sennheiser MKE2 is still a good mic, and they make a number of different models. So there's a lot of different stuff out there. Countryman, B6, B3, those are also very good. So there's a lot of stuff to choose from. Then getting into the wireless systems, of course, I work at Lectrosonics, so I have to say that Lectrosonics is still one of the big standards out there, and for good reason. Mainly what we have concentrated on as a manufacturer is to make products specifically for filmmaking. They're very tough. They're very small. I think I've got, this is the kind of size that the units are getting to now. You can see this, extremely small transmitters and flat and very, very lightweight. So
it's UHF
and there's other
system. It's UHF based.
Yeah, UHF. And our technology is called digital hybrid. It's something we've been using for almost 20 years. That the audio goes into the transmitter. It's turned into digital. It's processed, and then it's transmitted in a special format to keep noise down and to have real high fidelity. So more recently, though, we have all digital systems as well that even take the sound quality a little bit further. And that's the Wizicom from Italy makes a good product. Zaxcom makes interesting wireless as well. Shure makes wireless, of course, and trying to think. Audio Limited is a company out of England that's owned by Sound Devices. Makes some interesting products, some good sounding wireless. So there's a lot of different units to choose from.
What about A10?
Often comes down to
A10 from Sound Devices.
Sound Devices, Audio Limited A10. A number of people are using that for their boom transmitter because it's a belt pack transmitter that provides 48 volts phantom power for a mic like a 416 or a MK41 CMC6. So the
TX
like
version. I think the TX version does this.
Yes, that's right. So it's a belt pack transmitter, really designed to be worn on the body, but it provides 48 volts phantom. So people use it as a boom transmitter. So that's certainly one option. Lectrosonics makes a plug-on, of course. It's very popular. The HMA provides phantom power, digital hybrid transmission. It's out there all over the place, of course. So a lot of different choices. Comes down, like we said before, to is it a standard? Does it fit your needs with the form factor and the performance? From there, recorders, it's very similar. You've got your Aton Kantar type mixer recorders that are from
X3.
France. Yeah, really nice sounding units. Definitely their own kind of interface. Is something to get used to if you haven't used that before.
Itself.
Yeah, that's right. It's a mixer recorder. And then sound devices is probably the biggest standard. I would say there's more of those than all others combined, and they keep evolving as well. And they've got a lower line now, the Mix Pre. We have one of those at work, the Mix Pre 3. It's a really nice little unit. It's very small. I mean, it's like this big, really, really tiny. But of course, we've also got several of their 688 recorders, which are now discontinued, but really nice machines. I've used those for location recording, and they really are nice. So again, you got to think about the kind of system that you want, and there's a lot of choices out there for recorders. Even within a product line, there's different models. So yeah, go ahead.
No, okay.
Yeah, I mean that covers the basics. I mean, there's a lot of other things to look at, and when you look at these rig rundowns, there's some great videos out there like Ursa. They make straps and other accessories. They've got some really nice videos where they have a sound mixer, talk about all the parts of their system, including their utility cart. So I would recommend people look at those videos on YouTube. It's Ursa straps. I forget exactly what they call them, but there's a number of these videos, and each one of them is very detailed, where the sound mixer talks about their equipment, why they chose it, how they use it. Really excellent.
And for the last technical questions, what kind of sound should be recorded on set? Just dialogue or effects, sound effects, or ambience, or Foley's?
Yeah, it really depends on the production and what the director's looking for. There's been some movies where a lot of stuff has been recorded on set. I think of Simon Hayes from the UK as an example, as someone who's worked on a number of different films. But I think of his work on Les Miserables, which was quite a few years ago now. But they won an Academy Award for it, and part of the reason is, they captured the singing live on set, which is very unusual. Usually that's done in the studio, and it's mimicked, or they do it music video style, where they play it back and have them act like they're singing. But in that case, they recorded the actual singing. I think that there's times when you want to capture the environment. The like you said, Foley, certain kinds of effects can be captured on set, but in most big modern productions, they do all those separately. Sound effects are created, in the studio. Are you aware of a guy named Watson Wu? Do you know who he is? Yeah, Watson Wu. So he's out there all the time recording cars, guns, glass breaking, and that stuff's used for video games. It's used for movies. They make libraries of these sound effects. A library of every type of gun, being fired. Machine guns and handguns and shotguns and everything there is. So usually that stuff's done in post. It's added in post and recorded separately. The most important thing by far is to record the dialogue. But there are times when you might want to get an environment. Let's say it's a scene being shot next to a river. So it's probably a good idea to go ahead and capture some sound of the river itself, for continuity, so that when you're editing the dialogue, you can have a constant sound of the river going that's not chopped up, because it'll be a little bit in the dialogue, and maybe you can use a nice smooth recording of it for post-production. So it depends. There's a lot of different ways you could look at that.
And the last thing, what about the contract? What is the best contract for the sound people?
Well, not having done a lot of film work myself, I'm probably not the one to answer that. But, I would say when they tell you it's a standard contract, what that means is they don't want you to read it. They want you to sign it. So when you get a contract, it's always really important to read it very carefully, and don't be afraid to, cross things out and say, no, I don't agree to this, and try to get them to accept the modified contract that is better in your favor. And the other thing to do is, of course, ask your colleagues. Don't be afraid to share information. If you're being offered a contract, try to find out if anyone else in the community has worked for this company before or this production, and ask them, how did it go? Did they live up to their contract? Did you cross anything out when you worked for them on the contract? And if so, what? Were you paid on time? All these kinds of things. You want to get a sense of the people that you're dealing with. So I can't really say what's in those specific kinds of contracts. Again, I've never signed one of those myself. But in general, contracts is it's an important document. So treat it as such. Read it, and don't be afraid to ask questions. Don't be afraid to refuse certain parts of the contract if it is not in your favor, or especially if it's anything that's dangerous. They might want you to sign a liability waiver that says no matter what happens on this production, we're not paying for any damage or any accidents or harm. You can't sign that. You're going to work for them, and you expect them to be professional and everything to be safe. And if it's not, well, they should cover that, not you. You want to ask if there's insurance. And what does the insurance cover? That's an important thing. Let's just say that an actor drops your transmitter in the toilet, and that happens a lot. Who pays for that? Well, they should pay for it. That should be part of the production insurance, is to pay for loss and damage. And it's not your fault that it fell in the toilet. And what are they going to do? Make the actor pay for it and take it out of their pay? No, it's insurance that pays for that. So you want to make sure that that's covered.
And I have two typical questions I always ask. First of all, is that the whole idea of this project was to help other people, to understand and get closer to the sound and to the cinema, actually, because there's too many people out there from the whole world. I've got so many messages from the Africa. There was a guy from the Africa, and he was living in some village just outside the Cape Town. Mm-hmm. And he told me, I have no access to anything and any school and any courses. And could you please help me to just get closer to this industry? I just like it. And also I was talking with an African from the Ghana in Africa.
Ghana.
Ghana. He was a kid. It was a kid, just 16 years old kid. And he was doing just some cinematography for weddings for his friend. And he also told me that I need some just more clue, just small tips, just getting closer to this industry. And the whole project is about this. And my typical question, the two typical last questions, is that how supportive you are to other people. For example, there's people that going to start this business, or there are some students out there, or some independent filmmakers which they don't have enough money, or they are low budget. How supportive you are to other people?
Mm-hmm. Well, yeah, part of my mission in my career has been to give back, and take some time to do things like this with you today, and answer questions online, which I do all the time, as well as write articles and make videos that are instructive. So I put a fair amount of resource into helping anyone who can find this material. And I think that in general, this is a helpful industry. We want there to be good sound in movies. That's what our goal is as an industry. So everyone I know in the business is pretty helpful and does whatever they can, depending on their schedule and what their other obligations are, which we all have our work. The really top mixing sound mixers, for instance, I think of Simon Hayes here. he's very good at giving interviews and talking about the details of his work. Mark Ulano, I mentioned him before. He's written articles about his philosophy of sound. So I think as a whole, this industry has generated a tremendous amount of educational material that's out there. It's online, it's in articles, it's in videos, it's everywhere you can think. It's on social media. So it can be found, it can be discovered, and we can help, of course, point people in the right direction, which I have done many times. I've been contacted, by people like the ones you're describing. And so I try to point them in the direction of here's where you can find some resources to learn, until they can get to the point where they maybe have an apartment in Cape Town where they can get more direct access to the people that are making the movies, or whatever the type of production is. So yeah, that's very important to me, and I think to everyone I know in the industry.
I always say that this is a chain of kindness.
Yes,
you help some people, and he helps another one, and somebody helps you. This is a kind of chain.
absolutely.
The whole world is kind of chain.
It is.
Meet. It's not that much big. The world is not that much big. We meet each other.
This industry is quite small. You've heard of the concept of 6 degrees of separation. Do you know this concept? That, there's only 6 different people in between each of us on the entire planet. Well, when we get into an industry like this one, it's really more like 2 or maybe 3. Everyone knows each other. There's just not that many people in the sound for picture business in the entire world. So it's definitely to our advantage to share our knowledge and help people, and to give back and to pay it forward, as we say. Very important.
And for the last question, can you hear me?
Yes.
What's your plan for next 5 years? Do you have any plan?
I don't know that I have a specific plan for 5 years. I mean, I've been in this business for about 30 years. I would say the next 5 years are going to be more of the same. I'm working to build my team at Lectrosonics and to make sure that they're the best team that we can have. And personally, I still am involved with music, so I plan to continue doing that, as well as small projects like we described before, doing small recording projects. So I don't see a lot of change in 5 years on those things.
Thank you. I really appreciate.
Sure. Payam, this has been great chatting today, and thanks. Excellent questions. I mean, I wish you and all of your colleagues all the best. And, thank you very much for giving me the opportunity to speak with you today.
And thank you for accepting this conversation, and also thank you, especially from working that hard to make world listen better in Lectrosonics.
Of course. Yeah, that's been my life's work, is all about sound and making it better. So I appreciate that.
I was, just for the last thing, I was working with a sound designer guy in Berlin. His name was Martin Steyer. He was a very experienced sound designer, more than 50 years. And
okay. Yeah.
And once he told me, we were working on Babelsberg, Studio Babelsberg, on Potsdam in Berlin.
Okay.
And once he told me, a deaf guy, maybe a blind guy can fall in love, but a deaf guy hardly.
Right. Yeah.
And the people which tries to understand sound better, they are people like you, and thank you. That's all.
Well, thank you. You're doing good work. Keep it up. Thank you for reaching out to me. This has been great today, and let's keep in touch, okay?
Thank you very much.
Okay. Take care.
Take care. Bye-bye.
All right. See ya.